We have Wendy Duncan from Camden BRI, who we are partners with. Wendy, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Right, lovely, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me today. I am Wendy Duncan. I'm the Safety, Quality and Allergens Manager here at Camden BRI. And in terms of the agenda today, I was going to, again, very briefly, just let you know who we are. You may not have heard of us. I'll talk about allergen, the legislation and best practice around that, allergen cross-contact, and how you can sort of better look after your vending food and drink. Okay, so Camden, who are we? So we are a world-leading provider of science and technology to the food and beverage industry globally. We have an incredible number of internal technical experts available to anyone who engages with Camden. We've got huge laboratories, we've got pilot plants, so a lot of support we can give to the industry. We've got over 3,000 members now. You don't have to be a member to engage with Camden, but we are a member-based organisation as well. So that's the majority of the clients that I work with, and we're in 95 countries. And we've been around for over 100 years, so that's incredible. And all the profits go back into science and research to benefit our members. So it's really nice. So it's a really circular process. So I've been in the food industry now for over 25 years. I've always worked in manufacturing. And I have worked with allergens all of my career, really. And the kind of support that Camden can give in this space for hypersensitivity as a whole, so that can be the intolerances as well as allergens, is we do lots of testing. So as I said, we've got great laboratory facilities. I do a lot of consultancy work, so working with manufacturers to help them with some gap analysis of their food safety management systems. I look at quantitative and qualitative risk assessments. I help people understand the standards and the legislation and the guidance around that, because there is an awful lot. And I'm also supporting incident management, so helping with root cause analysis. Now, this can be, it'd be nice to do it with a proactive approach quite often for our customers to kind of go like, what if something went wrong? What have you got in place? And make sure they've got a robust system in place. But also, unfortunately, there are situations where people find themselves in an incident scenario and they need support, and we can give support as much as little as they need. I do lots of knowledge sharing as well. So events like today is brilliant. We would like to share the knowledge. And I do lots of training courses through Camden and bespoke for customers as well. And again, we do a lot of work around the compliance legislation and really helping people through all of that. So allergens. Allergens are still very prevalent in our population. They're increasing globally. And I'm sure you're all very much aware of increased demand for allergen information and your responsibility to that as well. So allergens in particular are your immune response, so your body's response to a protein that you've ingested. And this substance can be very harmless for most people, but for the people that have a reaction, it can be quite severe. And these are the people that we're trying to protect. Food allergens can't be killed. They're not microorganisms. What we can do through cleaning processes and better management, we can sort of reduce the risk of the allergen being present, or reducing the amount of its presence to a non-detectable level or to a very safe limit. So that's the difference with those and that and microorganisms. And there is no cure for people with food allergies. So people with food allergies, the treatment is to avoid. So that's why it's so important for us to make sure whatever we are providing, as James has already said, we need to make sure we're putting safe food on the market and we're giving consumers the right information. They need to make an informed choice about whether that food is appropriate for them. So in terms of a definition of allergens, we often talk about Codex at Camden. Codex is an internationally recognised standard. It's actually the foundation of most national regulations. They have got a definition of allergens here, which says an otherwise harmless substance, which it is. And many of the allergens, as you saw earlier, actually are a good part of the diet. However, for those that are capable of triggering the response and it starts their immune system and results in an allergic reaction, results in an allergic reaction for some individuals. This, in the case of foods, it's the protein, as I said, which is found that it triggers people who are sensitive. So it's these are the people that we're trying to protect. As James already shared, we've got the 14 allergens in the European legislation, which is always also in the UK legislation. That legislation hasn't changed since we've moved away from the EU. So we're still dealing with the same allergens. The only one in there that actually isn't a true allergen is the sulfur dioxide. It's actually not a protein. However, it causes the same reactions as the other 13. So that is why it's on the list. I think when I look at vending machines traditionally, we're talking about drinks machines, and the biggest allergen you're likely to find is milk. And I don't need to tell you that either. And you're probably going to have soy. That's going to either come in through different types of milks you might be introducing, but also in things like hot chocolate powders can have a combination of things. And not one product is the same. So you always need to check the label of the product you're purchasing. But obviously now, as you're getting more into fresh food, you could be coming into contact with all of these allergens in differing amounts. So it's very important. Everything's getting a lot more complex. You really need to understand what foods you are purchasing and selling to your customer. Just as a quick, so it's more of a reference for the future, just the difference between allergy symptoms and intolerance symptoms. So allergy symptoms can be mild or severe. Mild symptoms are like kind of the tingling of the lips, the skin rash, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal cramps. Pretty unpleasant. However, it can be very severe. And this is where you've probably heard of things like anaphylaxis. People have difficulty breathing. It can result in death. It can happen very, very rapidly. But if this happens, people survive, they still need medical treatment. Whereas an intolerance is not going to result in death. It's very uncomfortable and can last for days or weeks, but bloating, stomach pains, diarrhea and skin rash. So it's still pretty unpleasant. And probably the most common one you've heard of is lactose intolerance. This is where someone can't digest the lactose. So they might be looking for a product that doesn't contain milk in a vending setting. Okay, so that was a quick overview of allergens and their symptoms and why we're trying to protect the population. In terms of legislation, James has already alluded to this. So we've got the Food Safety Act 1990 was replaced by the EC 178 2002 food law legislation. This is a simulated legislation. So it was in Europe and it still has been translated into UK law. But the important part of this, which is meant to be mentioned today, Article 14 says food shall not be placed on the market if it's unsafe. That's a responsibility that we have. And also food that shall be deemed unsafe if it's injurious to health. We've already heard that a few times today already. And also unfit for human consumption. So overarchingly, regardless of all other guidelines, we need to bear this in mind. So we need to make sure we're doing everything in our power and our knowledge to also to make sure that we are delivering safe food to the marketplace. And the other piece of legislation, sorry, this is very wordy, just as you're going more into pre-packed food, the responsibility of the manufacturer to provide you with products that are correctly labelled, this falls under the EC 1169 2011 labelling. I've given a sandwich example, but this is making sure that the product has got all the right elements on the packaging. These are mandatory, but the key one I wanted to pull out again is the second one down. As part of the ingredient list, the allergens must be highlighted. So you must make sure you're purchasing food that's properly labelled and they've highlighted their allergens if present. And we say normally they should be emphasised. So you will see different styles on the label. That is a manufacturer's decision to make sure they feel they emphasise them correctly. But generally we're seeing bold or uppercase or actually a combination of both, which is really sort of highly recommended. So if you're serving a sandwich as an example or sausage roll or whatever it might be, and it's pre-packed, you must make sure that is fully labelled in the machines. There is this guidance, which David has already alluded to. We're transitioning now from the old version to a new version, which is in draft, which we're hoping will come out soon. And this gives some really good guidance about the kind of good hygiene practices. And I'm just going to pull out some elements as we go through. So as David said earlier, I think we talked about there's three different categories. So category A, we talk about the shelf-stable products, sort of ready to use, ready to eat. So these are safe when they've been delivered to you. Okay, so you just need to take care when you are then in your handling, making sure there's no damaged packaging and that you're storing things correctly. Making sure the operators really understand their responsibility with allergy management. And this is where training, we've already heard today, training comes into everything. And I will mention it a few times as well. So a handler, if they've been eating peanuts and they haven't washed their hands, they need to understand they could be causing a cross contact of that allergen to that food product, to that packaging. So that's something you really want to avoid. So operators really need to be understanding about good hygienic practices and the impact of their behaviours that can actually cause an issue. So making sure they've got good hygiene training. As we said, there are some great courses that AVA do, and there's a free allergen course actually on allergen handling on the FSA as well. So there's, it's very accessible to all, which is great. Glass fronted machines with screens should show the full ingredient list and allergy info if possible. There is a kind of slight exemption for vending machines in the distance selling that says that because actually with the Tasha's law coming in, it was that actually the consumer should know exactly the allergens at the point of ordering. So to help them make that decision, but we know that's difficult for vending machines. So it just makes sure that these things have to be fully labelled and has to be really clear what the product is called. If there are any may contain statements or produced in a factory, these should be included as part of your communications. Especially when we talk about drinks machines and we talk about the modern machines, obviously they are great. They've got screens and you should be able to get sort of full ingredient and allergy information before you purchase. If you've still got some older machines out there, then this information should be available on the machine. And it should also, you should consider the may contain, especially when we start talking about if someone gets a black coffee, for example, actually it's highly likely that there is a cross contact with milk in that just through the nature of the machines. And you can't 100% guarantee there won't be. So you need to kind of indicate that is the case. And that's also important for you to understand your machines, how they work, how they dispense. Powders generally, it sort of says they don't always pose an airborne cross-contact risk, but do be conscious of it. If you're especially when someone's going in and cleaning the machine, how they're moving things around and not kind of contaminating the air in the machine. And ensuring that the allergy information that you've got really matches the packaging that you've got. So if you are displaying how you're displaying your allergy information, just make sure that everything is aligned and up to date, and you've got a sort of process in place to check to make sure that is being followed and there's a clear procedure. As I said already, so including milk warnings if your black coffees are shared with white coffee. So that's an understanding of your machine and what you're dispensing and whether you sort of assess the risk or whether it needs to be labelled, which in most cases it will be. Avoid storing part-used ingredient bags in machines. One, for other hygiene practices, you don't want to use packets in machines and for other hygiene reasons, but for allergens, you don't want anything open or in that environment. So make sure they are stored in a segregated area safely. And making sure that there's a kind of a clean up, spillages are cleaned up before thoroughly, but also there's a procedure. So I think that the key thing out of all of this, and James already sort of mentioned this, it's about having records for everything you do. It's about having training. It's about making sure there is a procedure and it's followed. People understand what they need to do and how to report it. And to sort of make sure that they're minimising any cross contact. For me, I'm talking about allergens, but this is also just good hygienic practices. When we talk about chilled and frozen food, you may be getting things from smaller producers. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure they're labelled correctly. You're aware of what allergens you're handling and how they are being delivered to you. The allergy information is not mandatory before purchase, but it needs to be clearly visible what the name of the food is, so people have got a good indication of what they are intending to purchase. Because it's not always possible to have all of the allergen information straight away. However, consumers will rely on past experience as well. So if recipes change, there needs to be a clear indication that that recipe has changed. If you're working with suppliers, ideally encourage them, you need to understand the allergy changes. Try to push back if you don't want to be taking products that have got new additional allergens. If the allergy status stays the same or you have less allergens, that is a much better position to be in. But either way, do indicate that there is a new recipe. And especially when it involves allergens, it's very critical. Ensuring product names are descriptive and fully visible so that they can have a really good indication of what product they are purchasing. Avoid contaminating packaging after loading. So again, like I said, think about what the handlers are doing, how they're behaving, what else has been in the machine. Has there been any damaged packaging that may have contaminated other parts of the machine? So it's really being really conscious of everything that's happening in that space. Treat the children frozen foods the same as you would, treat all foods the same in terms of how you handle allergens. So just be really, really conscious of that. Just important to, make sure that they are created in exactly the same way. There's a good bit of guidance, a one-pager, which I thought was worth highlighting for the AVA created the rules on allergy labelling. So they highlight what the 14 allergens are, which we've talked about, and talking about how allergy information needs to be provided. So it really, the best practices all must be available before purchase for all products sold by vending machines. The glass-fronted machines, no extra allergy information is needed beyond the packaging. Closed-fronted machines or hot drinks machines, they need allergy information must be displayed on the machine, and this is not good enough just to have it with a QR code or a website. It needs to be visible so someone can make that choice. That would be the best practice. And then the allergy wording, so you would clearly say contains and then what allergen that is, and make that in a very bold, very visible language. And again, the good practice and your due diligence is to kind of keep records of everything. And as James already said, maybe keeping a scrapbook of all of the labels from your suppliers, or getting your supplier to help you on how you can best manage what you are keeping in your machines. That kind of traceability as well, which I will come on to in a minute. And also you need to really have a contact on the machine. So people have got a way of contacting the vending operator if they have any concerns or issues. And this is what the one pager looked like. That's for your future reference. But if we talk about cross contact, this is kind of, we're hopefully in the machines you've got a good undamaged packaging, it's sealed, it's where it's correctly labelled. But we've got to try and think about the cross contact, and this is where occurs when allergenic foods or ingredient is an unintentionally incorporated into another food that is not intended to contain the allergenic food. So how can this happen? I've already mentioned a few times people. We can be our biggest vector. So make sure people understand they have the right training on how to handle things, the right hygiene understanding of allergens, what allergens are they handling and how they need to behave around them, and think about where they have interacted with food as well. So if they've just had their lunch or they've had a snack and they may have something on their hands or in their pockets. So just be conscious of that. We talked about things being airborne. So making sure that if you are using any materials, ingredients that particularly seem to have, like a powder, which could be in the atmosphere, just be conscious of which ingredients they might be and how they can be handled. Transportation, making sure things are transported correctly, they're not getting contaminated within that process, and maybe what was in the trucks before. So it's really, really important. Thinking about the storage of ingredients. So if you can segregate things out, keep things separate so there is no risk of contaminating things, and do this with kind of, it's having a reasonable approach to it. So looking at the kind of things that you're handling and how you can store them. And then obviously the equipment, which is important. So it already kind of alluded to talking about hygienic practices around machines, hygienic designs of machines, and really working with your manufacturers, find out from them about how you should be cleaning that machine. What are the right cleaning chemicals for cleaning allergens as well as other aspects of your machine? and really work with them as your partners. So doing some form of risk assessment, just really assessing, what ingredients are you sourcing? What supply, what controls does your supplier have? Have you approved your suppliers? Are they reputable? Having that all as evidence, all kind of all helps you keeping your due diligence, and it all feeds into that HACCP plan that James was talking about. How you're storing your ingredients, your finished goods, and how you're segregating them, really being conscious of what allergens you're managing and where you are, how you're handling them. Again, like I just said, talking about cleaning and maintaining the vending machines, work with your suppliers, make sure that you are cleaning them correctly and using the right chemicals. And handling during restocking to avoid cross-contamination. As I said, the classic one, someone's been eating some dry roasted peanuts at lunchtime and they've got that on their hands. So making sure they've got some good hygienic practices and understand the impact of what could happen. If there is any precautionary allergen labelling for your machines that you need to say may contain, like we talked about the black coffee, if all controls have been put in place and there's still an unavoidable risk, then a may contain label is appropriate and should be used. Cleaning the machines, you should have a validated method, a checked, tested method to remove allergen residues, especially for the coffee machines and other machines. Like we're now obviously handling things like soups will have quite a lot of different allergens in there, and hot chocolate will have some other allergens as well. So using dedicated cloths and cleaning solutions to avoid the cross contact, it's really important. And just rinsing something out with water does not clean something. And I think it's just ensuring that the people that are doing, the operators are understanding this. I already alluded to the fact segregation and storage. So storing your allergy containing products separately during transport and loading. Can you keep them apart? Avoid placing allergenic sort of rich snacks above the allergenic free from snacks. And checking packaging, making sure it's not damaged, that it's not kind of contaminating other packaging in your store. And training, which is really important. So ensuring that operators and restocking staff are trained in allergy awareness and cross-contact prevention. And this is within reason. So again, there are courses that the AVA can guide you to. There's also a free FSA allergen course as well, which for an absolute basic would be absolutely ideal, and an affordable approach for all businesses to do. So if we're talking about looking after your vending, so again, as I said, it's like making sure you've got reputable suppliers. They've either you've audited them or they've been audited by a third party and they have accreditation. Think about, are you using the recommended cleaning chemicals for allergens for your machines? Make sure you keep all your records, have a traceable supply chain, know where your products are coming from. Have a written procedure for withdrawals of products. So if a supplier says to you they're having to withdraw a product, you need to know where that product, their product has gone, which machines has it gone to. You need to have that traceability and you need to act quickly with that withdrawal issue being issued, so that you can make sure that you have taken all reasonable steps in order to remove that product from the marketplace. Good practice also is for those in contact with the machines to be aware of allergy risk. As I said, it's really worth putting people through some training that you feel is appropriate for their role. Part packaged ingredients shouldn't be stored in the machine to avoid cross contact. And packaging and machine parts should be stored separately from food materials. And as I said at the beginning, if you've got products that are coming in with a new recipe, they've got to be clearly indicated. And if your supplier isn't doing that, you really need to ask them to do that or change suppliers. So yeah, make sure that change is very clear. And like I said about the training, if you've maybe got a supervisor, and James alluded to this as well, is actually they probably need a slightly higher level of their hygiene awareness, and something like a level 2, which is approximately 6 hours of training. And this I think you can get through the ABA, and will cover all sorts of things. So from source of harmful bacteria, cleaning and disinfectant, personal hygiene, cross-contamination, causes and prevention. So that's kind of really in my kind of allergen space, and the chilled chain, understanding that, and pest awareness. So that kind of thing is really would be very, very helpful for the supervisory level. So that was sort of my presentation today. So talking you through what allergens are, the legislation and best practice that currently exists around this space, watch outs for allergy cross contact, and what to look out for when looking at your vending foods and drinks. Apologies.